All right, we're starting to hit critical mass here. Thank you everyone for joining. My name is Dan Anthony. I am executive director of We Pay the Tariffs. We are based in Washington D.C. and started last year in response to really just a flurry of new tariffs that were being rolled out, new authorities that had never been used, and sort of a lot of the questions that we were getting from small businesses that we had worked with over the years about what it all meant, what might happen next, and quite frankly, the answer was nobody knew. So we thought that a group like this would be a great place to convene some of the small business owners who are being impacted, hear their stories, and really help share those stories so that everyone understood what the impacts of the tariffs on their local communities were. Um, Over the last year, we've grown our network to be over 1,100 small businesses. Um, I think that shows not just the sort of broad impacts, but also that willingness and that ability for everyday people to speak out and say, "This is what it means to me." Um, the list has been a bit, surprising even for me of the people on this call. I've known Matthew Cagle for several years now, but Ryan and Andy I have been introduced to or met in the last week or so. And Casey, I think, signed on to one of our efforts a month or two ago, but this is the first time we've actually seen each other in person. So it's a great response. I think there's people who have really interesting stories. They're everywhere, and I'm really glad that they are here to participate today. We have one more person that may be joining that I thought was joining but hasn't logged in, so it may just be the five of us. Um, but I will do very quick intros here, and then I'll share some data, and then we'll turn it over to folks to tell their own stories. And so, um, first up, we'll have Matthew Cagle. He's the owner of Rig'em Right down in Morehead City, North Carolina. They are a sporting goods equipment company. We then have Casey Wright from Houghton Horns in Keller, Texas. They are a musical instrument seller. We have Ryan Guay. I don't know if I got that right.
Pronounced gay.
Ryan Gay, okay, from Flated in Missoula, Montana, and they are the inventor of inflatable truck covers. Um, and then we have Andy Payne from Down Decor in Cincinnati, Ohio, which is a domestic manufacturer of bedding. Um, Everything here is on the record. The video is being recorded. We would ask for any of you that are um, television stations that you're not necessarily using this recording, but if you want to reach out afterwards, we're happy to set up those one-on-ones. Um, and then we will go from there. So I want to start off just real quick with a little bit of data to set the stage. So I'm going to share my screen here. Um, I hope everyone can see this. And so uh, new tariffs really got rolled out at the beginning, starting in really February of last year. But the one that really got most attention was the Liberation Day tariffs that were announced on April 2nd. We are now coming up on that 1 year anniversary. Um, to give a sense of what this all means, there are what we call normal tariffs. This is just the course of operating. They've been around. There's an official schedule. You can look up your codes, figure out what you owe. And then there's this whole other category of tariffs that have been imposed under different statutory authorities. These have been delegated by Congress to the executive, but there is no real opportunity to say, "Oh, we approve this rate, we approve that rate." So these can go on and be taken off at the whim of the president. And from March of last year to January of this year, which is the most recent data available, about $250 billion paid in these tariffs that are just imposed and removed at the discretion of the executive. And so we've got the state breakdowns there. On the IEPA tariffs themselves, which is what were announced on Liberation Day and struck down by the Supreme Court on February 20th, it's In the period that we can capture, it's a little bit more than $140 billion that we can see. Again, we've got them broken down by state. If any of you watched the Liberation Day announcements, they created these nice little charts with rates by country. I also have big versions of them behind me here showing those state breakdowns. But this is our data trying to sort of really localize what those costs look like state by state on imports into, say Montana, where Ryan is. $42 million on tariffs paid direct on imports directly into the state of Montana, just based on these IEEPA tariffs. With the talk shifting to refunds, that's money that would then go straight back to those companies once we've got those processes figured out. Because there's that big gap, there's other authorities, Section 232 national security tariffs, Section 301 tariffs on China. We'll have Section 122. There are very different impacts here. And so you've got a state like Maine. The IEEPA ruling from the Supreme Court means that nearly all of the new tariffs they've paid are going to be coming back. You look at the other side, Michigan, only about a quarter of the tariffs paid over the last year are actually affected by that Supreme Court ruling because they're bringing in so much under that's affected by Section 232 for autos, steel, aluminum, et cetera. And so these regional disparities are big. There are some places where this has effectively solved the problem. There's others where the IEEPA is a fairly small piece of it. Same thing, we see this on the sector side. And so nearly all tariffs on medical equipment, supplies, footwear, apparel would be sent back. Metals, motor vehicles, aluminum, really not helped at all by the Supreme Court ruling. And so we're just throwing this out there so that people can keep in mind that when you hear the Supreme Court struck down tariffs, it doesn't mean they struck down all of the tariffs. There's still a lot of them that are out there. It is very company and sector and product specific, and you see it on the countryside too. And so a country like Bangladesh that's importing, trying to speak too fast here. A company like Bangladesh that's exporting mostly apparel, the U.S. buyers will get all of their money back soon, hopefully. But Slovakia is mostly sending auto parts. Those are still covered. So companies who are buying from Slovakia are mostly still going to be paying tariffs for the foreseeable future without much prospects for refunds. As I mentioned, our list has grown over the last year to be over 1,100 signers. If you go to our website, wepaythetariffs.com, you can see this map. You can filter by state. You can zoom in and click around to see who in your area is impacted. We know the impacts are much larger. I believe Customs and Border Protection has said there are about 330,000 importers of record affected by IEEPA. These are people who have proactively reached out to us, signed on to a letter, provided their contact information. So it's really just a drop in the bucket. But if you're looking to tell local stories, you can go to that map and click around and see if there's someone you're interested in talking to, and we can try to connect you. We will send this out in this little deck in the post webinar email. But it's got all the information there. So anything that you need, you can reach out to us and we will try to help. But with that, I'm going to stop and turn it over to Matthew Cagle and let him tell a little bit about his experience over the last year.
So yeah, jumping right in. Well, firstly, I'm sorry I'm wearing a t-shirt and haven't shaved, but we're building a house and pouring concrete today, and I had to be here. Anyway, so yeah, in my business model, like we produce products for the outdoor industry, from camp chairs to backpacks, things like that. And we conduct our meetings like we sell to big box retailers. So we conduct our meetings in August for the shipment, the following August. So we're 12 months ahead. And once those prices are locked in, we're locked in. And fortunately, the situation this past year was so chaotic. Many of our retailers, we were kind of scrambling. What do we do? Prices are going to go through the roof. Customers are used to buying our goods, at this price. Now they're going to pay 30, 40, 50% more. in some cases, some of our tariffs are 90% still, 90%. And so we agreed, like, we want to keep the doors open for a year. So let's meet in the middle. We'll both eat a ton of margin, cut our profits, but let's try to keep we did raise retail prices, but didn't raise them the full amount. So just to keep the products sellable. We're concerned because inventory is already produced at this point, shipping, from overseas. And, we didn't want to be stuck with a warehouse full of inventory that we couldn't sell because prices were astronomical. So we took a big margin hit. And our customers took a big margin hit, and the retailers, I mean, excuse me, the consumer took a margin or a price increase. So everybody lost, and some of the other impacts were our factories, it was uncertain times. I mean, we didn't know if we were going to keep the doors open. And, factories paused production right, in the middle of some of the chaos. So we lost, 3 months of production. And this is kind of when tariffs were 150%, when it was really going wild. And, we're seasonal business. So missing 3 or 4 weeks is very impactful. And we missed more than that. This was the first year since I started my company in 2006 that we didn't grow. And we were on a, really sharp growth trajectory. I mean, which is great. I mean, we're growing like crazy. And then all of a sudden we hit a year where we're flat. And the crazy thing is like when I'm out and about at trade shows and stuff talking to colleagues and they're like, how'd you end up this year? I'll say, well, we ended up flat. And they were like, wow, you did great. You're the only one that I've heard of that was actually flat because most people are down. And, I mean, it's, profits are in the tank because we took a margin hit and, stagnant growth. And it's literally only because of the tariff. That it is this the only reason. And I mean, it's tough. And then, another thing, like some of our products are produced in the Philippines. Well, the Philippines is a great partner to the US, military bases. And the Philippines actually, we bought, the Philippines bought more US goods than they bought of our goods, but yet they still got hit. In other words, like this whole thing was supposed to be about trade, balancing trade. Well, the Philippines should have been in the catbird seat, but they still got stuck with 19% tariff increase. And I mean, that was just super frustrating. And our Philippines factory is owned by an American. So he's getting it on that side. And I mean, anyway, I'm not going to ramble on. Dan told me to keep it short and sweet. So I'll pass the mic.
Thanks, Matthew. We'll turn it over to Casey.
Sure, yeah. So we did have to raise most of our prices 10 to 30%. And one thing that, well, it's sad to see us having to raise prices on our customers, but think about the impact that is going to have on the music industry downstream. So if you think about a 12-year-old kid that wants to take up the trumpet, and it could be they used to be able to buy a cheap trumpet from China and get started. And then 10 years from now, maybe they will be ready to step up and buy a made in America custom trumpet. But now they're not going to do that. Their band program doesn't have the budget to buy these instruments. Their family doesn't have the budget to buy these instruments. So the international and domestic music industry is symbiotic. We need the imported instruments to get the students started so that they can grow up and then buy the expensive custom-made instruments from the US or from Germany or the United Kingdom or Japan or different other countries. But we are going to see this having an impact on the music industry for 10 years, 20 years of all the kids that didn't take up music today. And that's been tough for us because, we have our loyal customers that have been with us for 10 whatever years, and shout out to them. We love them. But a lot of online customers are really price conscious, and they see that we've raised our prices 30%. Well, they're going to go to Amazon. So this has really been driving business away from small family-owned businesses towards the big mega corporations that can afford to eat more of those price increases or tariff costs. So even if the IEPA refunds, if that process does get worked out, we are still not going to be made whole for the loss of sales that went to Amazon or just never happened in the first place. So just refunding us won't even get us back to baseline. Um, and then it's also just completely messed up our cash flow. You know, it used to be we get the products in and then we have maybe a month to sell them before the bill to the manufacturer comes due. But now you have to pay 50% upfront to US Customs. And then you hope a few weeks later to sell the product. And then you pay the manufacturer. Well, where are we going to get this 50% to pay US Customs? Well, we have to go to the bank. We have to increase our line of credit, take out a loan. So now we're paying interest on the loan. So, yeah, even if we do get refunds, we are still not going to be made entirely whole for the expenses we've floated to try and just get more inventory into the country. So that's about where we are today. Thank you.
Thanks, Casey. And I saw a stat recently that said imports of brass instruments into the U.S. were down 33% last year. So to that point about people never starting taking up these instruments, you see that in the trade data. I'll say to all of the press on here, if you have questions and want to start putting them in now, if you know you're going to be asking questions, you can put them right into the chat and we can start looking at those to see how we'll start asking them once we're done. But I will turn it over to Ryan.
Hello. So yeah, I'm Ryan Gay. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Flated. In 2020, during pandemic, we invented the world's first inflatable truck topper. And we used previous industry experience making paddle boards over in Vietnam to use that to do something different. And while it's been a great idea and it's been a very successful project, I remember last year, and I can't believe it's already been a year, but when we watched that press release and those signs behind you were out in that lawn, and we thought we were sitting pretty good because we were manufacturing in Vietnam and we had never really manufactured much in China. And then I see those signs and Vietnam's #1 on the list at 56%. And so all of a sudden our hearts sank. We didn't know what that meant. And then that just led to, a whole year of uncertainty. We didn't know one day what the tariffs were, what they were going to be the next day, if they were going to go up, down, this way or that way, what products fell under what. Our brokers didn't know. It was just kind of frankly, kind of a joke for the most part, but it really made it impossible for us small businesses to actually, plan properly. And as Casey mentioned, cash flow, everything changed just like that. And so, what that did for us as a brand is, we had to really slow down on our growth. We had to slow down on hiring help. We had to slow down on some new projects. We had to slow down on going to events. We had to slow down and increasing our office size. There was a lot of things that, we just had to, frankly, just completely put on hold because we didn't know what it was going to do at the end of the year. And what it did do towards the end of the year is it took about a $400,000 chunk out of our profitability for the year. And that was, partly the tariffs paid, but then the lower margin that we ended up selling for, because we did raise prices, but not to the extent that we needed to maintain our whole margin that we had planned the year on. So, it's been a challenge. Luckily, we've been creative enough to get through it and we're doing okay. But I think there's one other thing that, really I've heard talk about. One of the unintended, consequences of this is the U.S. businesses that have been manufacturing overseas and are maybe failing or stopping production. Well, now it's the easiest time ever in history for those factories to sell direct to the U.S. through Amazon, or they can, through AI, make a website in a day. They can create a Facebook account and start doing AI-created ads in a day. And now all of a sudden, they're selling direct to the consumer here in the States for what we were paying them for the product previously. And, this is one thing that I like I said, I have not heard anybody really talking about this, but if it only take a few minutes scrolling through your social media account seeing brands pop up that you're like, wait, where were these guys yesterday in the automotive industry? They look totally legit. They look, their content is really good. And you do a little bit of backstory, and it's just a factory selling direct to the US through their website, through Amazon, with no US infrastructure whatsoever, other than maybe a 3PL on the ground. And, I feel like this is just going to further happen as if these tariffs continue to impact us. It's just going to make it easier and easier for actual foreign entities to operate in the US with no limitations and really low barrier to entry, and undercut the competition, undercut us to an extreme level. So, yeah, like I said, it's been a wild time. We're still doing good. Thank you for this organization and what you guys are trying to do. And I don't even know what to say about the refunds. I have no faith that we'll ever see any of that. So, we're not planning on it. I'll say that.
Thanks, Ryan. Andy from Down to Core.
Yeah, my name's Andy Payne. I'm one of two owners of Down to Core. We are a manufacturer in Cincinnati that produces private label utility bedding, primarily down bedding and down alternative bedding. We sell to retailers, major retailers, and brands. And the big problem we have is almost all of our components are imported, but then assembled in the Cincinnati. Downproof fabric is not woven in the USA. Nobody weaves it. Feather and down that we use to fill products. Most of it comes from China because nobody eats geese and duck like the Chinese. Number two on that list would be Europe. We navigated the first round of tariffs with our retailers and brand partners, each of us sharing a little bit of the pain and us cutting our margin. And then it became an exercise of insanity where we were doing recosting every 2 or 3 weeks as the tariffs would change. And it got to the point with a lot of our major retailers where we were doing costing per PO. All right, based on the tariffs today, how much will this PO cost? Complete inability to plan. I think we're up to almost $2 million in tariffs that we paid so far. Our retailers have already told us that for the money that they've already paid extra for the goods that had tariffs applied, they want a refund. So even if we get a refund, we're not going to see very much of it because our customers expect to get it back. In February of 2025, we had 154 people working in our factory. Today, we've got 78. So we've lost quite a few employees due to the tariffs. Listen, the customers, they know what their price thresholds are, and they started cutting orders because they knew they would not sell as much product, which meant in turn that we didn't need to make as much. And we tried to be proactive for the business sake and let people go as soon as possible. It's just been incredibly challenging on so many different levels, cash flow levels, costing levels with our customers, cutting margin, just been a very painful process.
Thanks, Andy. And that actually leads into one of the questions that we have here from Harvest Prude, who said the administration has the tariffs in part by saying it will redirect products to the US and benefit more American manufacturers. I'm assuming the manufacturing capacity isn't always available in the US, but would be interested in hearing directly on why that's not a solution. And so we'll sort of go back to Andy just real quick since you're manufacturing this product and its components, but then if everyone else wants to jump in after that about whether your product is available or ever could be made domestically in the US and sort of what are some of those challenges.
Well, for us, it's a question of where the raw materials come from. If somebody wove downproof fabric in the US, we would certainly consider buying from them. If the USA had even remotely close to the supply of feather and down that we need, but the USA consumer just does not eat goose or duck meat in the quantities that other places do to produce the raw material. Our all down and feather that we use is a byproduct of the meat industry. And the meat industry just, we have capacity. We just don't have raw materials that are affordable.
And
Yeah,
go ahead, Casey.
I can speak to that in the brass music instrument industry, we need to import brass and nickel silver to make our instruments. So you slap a tariff on those, and American made custom instruments are going to get more expensive. And also, um, I just totally lost my train of thought. I had a second point. Oh, yeah. So there was one corporation that was selling homemade custom American brass instruments, Conselmer. And they announced in November, December that they were moving their last trumpet factory production to China. So even with these tariffs, American production of brass instruments has not increased. It is decreased and it is still moving overseas. And so it's just higher prices for Americans with no increase in our own industry, at least as far as brass instruments are concerned.
Yeah, Dan, I can share a real life story about. Can you hear me okay? Okay. So I have spent the last 6 months since all this started trying to find domestic sourcing for some of our products. Um, a lot of our products are, kind of labor intensive. And, one thing I've been telling people is like, I know anybody that's importing would much rather produce it domestically. Lead times, I mean, just having American manufacturing, we'd love that. But the unemployment rate is 4.2% now, and you factor in who can't work or retired and stuff like that. I mean, we don't have enough human beings here to produce all the goods that we consume. China has 1 billion more people than we do, and they have plenty of labor force that we just don't have in the U.S. to do these things. But I did, after months of trying to find somebody to make one of our core products. Um, the guy, worked up a price. He simply could not even keep up with the quantity we wanted. And his price was, 25% higher, even with the tariffs that we're paying. And I said, look, I just cannot do this. I can't afford that. And his response was, well, don't you want to support American workers? And I said, yeah, but I want to support my American workers first, because paying 25% higher than we're already paying with tariffs, it was pointless. I mean, we just have to close the doors. And I mean, I've got, employees in my warehouse and employees, marketing and distribution and sales team and all those people that literally wouldn't have a job if I had to raise my prices 25% higher than the already 30% higher with tariffs. So, um, I hope that answers the question about the potential for U.S. manufacturing for consumer type goods.
Yeah, and I guess I would say in our scenario, making inflatable products, there really isn't any, good existing manufacturing opportunities or factories for our type of drop stitch inflatable here in the U.S. And, there are a couple places where we could do some custom stuff, but all of the material still has to come out of China. And there's nobody producing the material that we use here in the States in a quantity that you could actually run a production line on. And not only that, the man hours involved in producing our product at U.S. labor rates, honestly, our product would be priced out of the market and would not be a viable product if we were paying those sorts of hourly rates that, realistically we would have to pay here for a U.S. factory.
And, everyone says, well, why don't somebody open a factory to start producing it in the USA? Let's look at downproof fabric. Each loom costs about $500,000. And to have any operation of scale, you have to have at least 50 or 80 looms. Who's going to make that kind of capital investment, which potentially could be a 3-year window of us having this tariffs if the administration changes and the new administration says, all right, we're getting rid of the tariffs? You've just sunk a ton of capital into something that's going to be obsolete.
And you've still got the meat problem. You still don't have the geese and the duck. And that's, and this is something that we've heard from others. There was one company that I talked to who's got a consumer good that retails for about $100. This is a larger company, and they explored what it would cost to do it at one of their U.S. distribution facilities if they put in a dedicated manufacturing section at a distribution facility, and the retail price would be $1,000. So you're literally talking a 10x price increase for something that people are used to paying $100 for, and so the solution is to just not buy it at all. So there's no jobs there. There's no investment, and it's the whole ecosystems. I think that we've heard here. Okay, you want to do this? Well, you need all the components. Well, those are imported, so you'd have to then set up all the factory component, factories producing components, but they might need imported equipment, and so the costs just ramp up very very quickly there. Um, so we've got, I see your question, Whitney. I'm going to get to it in a little bit, but this is still kind of continuing on this one. The administration said they plan to pursue other pathways to implement tariffs. As the landscape keeps changing, what's your game plan for dealing with the uncertainty that's still present this year?
Well, I
Uh,
wake up every morning and check the news and see how many hours I need to spend changing prices on our website that day.
Yeah,
I,
for me, the reality is, we're still planning, just on the conservative side, and we're still, not investing into as much growth and events and opportunity that we probably would. And then now, Casey mentioned looking at the news every morning. Now we're getting slammed double here, and we're going to get slammed hard on transportation costs on all of our goods with oil prices right now. So we are going to still be paying a tariff, and then now the cost to ship goods, import goods, and all that is going to go up dramatically here very quick. As with raw goods and anything petroleum based, I think we're going to see some pretty serious price increases in the near term.
Yeah, for us, we, one of our products is a camp chair. So it was subject to the 232 and the 301 tariffs because it's metal components. And, our tariffs on that are, I think, 55% still. And we have some products that are still 90% tariffs. And those items, I mean, we're considering just not even producing them next year. I mean, just cutting that segment right out of our product line, because what we're hearing now, to Casey's point about checking the news every day, is, if we can't use the IEPA, we're going to double down on, 232 and make 301 tariffs, which impact that particular product segment of ours. And, I've told people, I said, I get like U.S. manufacturing for items that have national security interests, pharmaceuticals, shipbuilding, you know, automotive, things like that. But do we really care who's making, our sneakers or, a spatula or consumer goods? We have American companies that have great jobs in marketing and sales and distribution and working in retail stores and running websites. And, we're at 4.2% unemployment, and America's working, but we're doing really good jobs, and we live a good lifestyle because we can buy consumer goods at an affordable price from overseas.
I can't remember if it was Ryan or Matthew who said it, but we sure do treat our allies well, don't we? I mean, when we jack up the tariffs higher on them than we do on somebody like China, it just seems to me the logic. I don't like tariffs at all. I'm at heart, I'm a free trader, but it would seem to me that we'd want to keep our allies on a lower plateau of tariffs than we do our economic adversaries. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and so I want to do just a quick follow up here because it was something I meant to ask, and it's in line with this question, which is where, all right, so let's just pretend we all had crystal balls and we know not just what's going to happen tomorrow, but 3 years from now. And in a world where all of these tariffs just become the new normal, what does that mean for your business? I mean, Matt, you mentioned, cutting product lines, but in this new normal, where do you see yourself in 3 years in terms of, sales or growth or anything like that?
Well, I mean, for us, it's we have no choice. Well, like I mentioned earlier, we sell to big box retailers, and I mean they came to us this year and said, "Hey, last year, we know tariffs. We were willing to take lower margins, but we need our margins to get back to where they used to be." And I'm like, "Well, the tariffs hadn't changed." And they said, "Well, we don't care." And they're the big guys. We're the little supplier. I mean, talking Bass Pro, Cabela's, Dick's, big companies. And so, I mean, we have no choice but to cut some stuff, not hire, dial back marketing. I mean, we have to cut expenses. We have to cut product line. I mean, the items that are 50%, 90% tariff, we just can't go forward with them. So, and I mean, that's the only way we can plan is just to, dial back expenses, cut back hiring, and probably raise prices. I mean, we're going to have to raise prices. That's just the bottom line because, I mean, our margins, our profit this past year was almost half of what it was prior years. So, I mean, just can't keep on going like that.
There's a question. Oh, Casey, you're typing an answer there. Great. Uh, so there's a question here in your statement. You said a refund process should be as simple as possible and not need attorneys since the government already knows who paid what. Could you talk a little bit more about why that is and why it's important to avoid a complex process? Um, sure. So the Supreme Court struck down the tariffs. It did not sort of weigh in on refunds or refund processes. That has gone back to the Court of International Trade. And I think it's a very positive sign that the Court of International Trade is requesting lots of information, asking for weekly updates. There is a lot of holding the feet to the fire here, saying this money should be refunded. It should be refunded quickly. And the court has said we're not looking for a process that requires all of these companies to file lawsuits. Um, I've done a lot of work on other programs where refunds are really built into the process. The program lapses, it comes back, anything paid in the interim was refunded. And so you've got these systems and the experience with customs to say, what were the tariff overpayments associated with this? Send it back as a check. Um, and I think that's really what we're pushing here. I think regardless of the process, it could be a paperwork to open a new location. Any time that you're talking about paperwork and processes and hiring lawyers, it is always harder for the small businesses, just in terms of resources and manpower. No one I don't think on this call gets up in the morning and reads the Federal Register. It's my job, and I still don't really like to look at it that much. But to think that you've got millions of small business owners who wake up in the morning and are going to read the real intricate details of government filings is a bit unrealistic, at least if you want them to be successful at running their business rather than reading government announcements. And so there is a record. Everything has statistical codes attached to it. When someone brings in a camping chair, it says this is the normal code, this is the IEPA code, this is the Section 232 code, and these are the tariffs associated with each of them. And so requiring the government to tap into the knowledge that it already has to expedite those processes rather than shifting the burden to the small business importers to say, we've dug up all the paperwork from the last year that we shouldn't have to do in the first place. That's what we're trying to avoid, is that situation where the small businesses have been beyond inconvenienced. I mean, this has just been, for a lot of them, an all-consuming issue to deal with. We shouldn't now create a new all-consuming process to get that money back that was taken illegally in the first place. I don't know if any of you have thoughts on the refunds themselves. I know, Ryan, you said you didn't think you're not putting much stock in them. I'll say I'm a little bit more confident than you are that it will come back. I think there's still a lot of questions, but also sort of telling these stories and understanding like why these refunds are so critical is a big part of what we're trying to do to keep up the pressure for making it as easy as possible.
I do agree with you that the repayment system could be automated because we have some stuff that periodically appears on Section 301. Then we get an exemption, and when the exemption comes through, we don't do anything. The refund comes automatically.
I have been trying to get set up with the existing Customs and Border Protection process, and it's a mess. Like you have to register on this one website, and then you have to fill out a form 5106, and you have to email it to somebody else, and they get back to you a week later. And then you have to fill that information into another website, except it says the information is wrong. So you have to call and spend 45 minutes on hold to figure out, oh, well, it's expecting this email address from your company and not that email address from your company. and, and then you fill out another form, and then that takes 10 business days to process. We are registered now for automatic refunds with CBP, but I started the process in July and finally managed to fill out all the steps and get it worked out like 2 weeks ago. And that's still just getting registered to get the refunds. Apparently, it's sounding like I'm still also going to need to submit like an Excel file or something with the customs entry number for each affected shipment. And we get, 5 or 6 international shipments a week. I don't know how many days it would take me to compile that spreadsheet, how much information I could even find a year after the fact. So yeah, customs knows how much they've charged us. They should just be able to hit a refund button and send it back to us instead of putting that burden on us to try and find some customs paperwork from a year ago.
And I think that's one of the big outstanding questions. And so we've been trying to do updates to the companies in our network to make sure that they know sort of what's required. Um, the the information that will be needed to be uploaded to the government is an open question. There's sort of is it just the list of the entry numbers? If you've got a CBP account, that can be fairly easy to go in and just download. But is it, you know, 40 other columns that they're expecting with this? That hasn't come out in any of the filings to date. So I think that's a big area of uncertainty of, you know, will the government make it easy or will the government make it hard?
Hey Dan, we'll have to pay tax on the refunds too, right?
Probably, depending on it'll also depend on right how you file. If you're a pass through, then this would be personal income. And I should have caveated. I am not someone to take tax advice from, so please don't consider that official guidance of
We
any
will.
sort. Uh,
We will. So there's that.
um, So just here's a sort of general question here. I've heard that bigger companies have invested money in lobbying to try to get exemptions from tariffs, which hasn't been an option for smaller businesses. How has the tariff situation affected your relationship with the government?
Well, I think you sort of hit it on the head a little bit earlier, Dan, when you said, companies of our size, we don't have we're spending every hour of the day trying to run our business and grow our business and make our business better. So the distraction of having to try to learn all this stuff that Casey was talking about and filling out forms, and none of us have in-house counsel to be watching this every day. We have to hire that stuff out at an extreme hourly rate if we were to actually do that. And so it's just the distraction part of it is really hard, that makes it so uncertain and just sort of a throw up your hands and not really know what the answer is, and just buckle down and stay forward and focused on, showing up every day and trying to sell stuff.
We've
Uh,
communicated we've communicated with our House rep and the two state senators for Ohio, but that's about as far as we've gone to this point.
um, I had a question in mind and I just blanked on it. Coming back. So I participated in a roundtable with a couple small businesses and 8 or 9 members of Congress yesterday. And what the members asked, one of the questions was, what are the things that no one is really thinking about, but are, those unintended consequences? And the response I gave is I had heard from a company that they had withdrawn money from their retirement accounts and then had to pay penalties for that reason. So, are there specific examples of things that you've had to do or just like actions taken that really aren't on the radar of either policymakers or, I mean, frankly, your customers? I mean, I think we're going to see a shift here in the refund debate that says, well, you got money back. Are you going to give it to me? And then you've seen some lawsuits, even I think a class action against Costco that says, well, if you passed along the price, then you should pass it along to your customers. And so, what are those things that you had to do, or if you got your refund that you would be putting it back into that is not top of mind for sort of normal people who aren't inside your companies and seeing sort of the decisions you're making?
If we got the refund back, it would go directly to our credit line that we had to expand in order to pay the tariffs initially. It's and depending on what the tariffs are going forward, we would hopefully hire back a lot of the people that we had to let go previously.
And I think another one of the unintended consequences is the fact that, and especially in Matt and Andy's case, selling to big box, it's not all that difficult for those big box retailers to figure out where those factories are that you're producing your stuff and cut out brands if the price gets too high and just go factory direct. And that's what I was speaking on earlier as far as even consumer factory direct to consumer. But with the big box retailers, it's pretty easy for them to, cut the brand out and just go with the manufacturer to try to keep prices somewhat maintained.
Yeah, I
We
mean,
had, oh, go ahead, Matt.
I think Casey and Ryan mentioned this earlier, but we've seen this surge of competitors on Amazon, and there are a factory in China selling direct to the consumer. Well, they don't have to pay they don't have to pay the tariff. And so they're selling knockoff products for way cheaper than us and direct to the consumer. They just ship it from a factory directly to the consumer. So in this situation, you're taking sales from an American company and giving it directly to a Chinese company. And I mean, that's maybe an unintended consequence of the tariffs, but that's happening big time.
I was going to say we are at 150, and I think we had initially said 145 is when we were going to try to cut off. But if I'll sort of turn it over if anyone has any last thoughts they want to, anything that we didn't get asked, that you think is worth sharing. I'll let you jump on in and share it, and then we'll close it up.
If there's going to be tariffs, please don't let them fluctuate every other month. It's impossible to plan with our retail partners and our brand partners when it changes constantly. If there has to be tariffs.
That has been a big issue for us. If someone wants to order a custom made French horn, we can say, well, at the current tariff rate, it'll be $10,000 and take 3 months. But 3 months from now, it could totally change. It could be $8,000. It could be $12,000. That is scaring away more sales than anything. And, it's just terrible for business.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is I wish there was a way to show and prove an American-owned company, even if we are manufacturing overseas, but true American-owned, US-based company operating here, hiring employees, paying our taxes, going to events, spending money, doing everything we do as an American company should be definitely defined and thought about differently than a complete foreign entity acting in the US. And that's what I would just like to see, is some sort of acknowledgement that, hey, I appreciate if you guys could make in the US, understand maybe it's challenging or you can't, but you are an American company operating here, paying employees and doing the right thing. So that's what I'll end with, I guess.
No final thoughts, Matthew?
I mean, Bud, you've known me for a couple years. I could just keep on blabbering about it. But I mean, the thing is like now it's not okay. We have, trade issues with China, so we're going to directly target them. I mean, we raise tariffs on every country, so now it doesn't. In fact, there's in many cases now is we're more incentivized to go back to China because we can get it produced cheaper. Because some of these other countries that are longer partners, it's no cheaper to make it there, and so you go back to China. I mean, if there's a tariff on every single country, all it is just a tax on U.S. business with no, like, real, no, not identifying a real problem. And here's how we're trying to solve it. It's just raising our taxes. And that's really all that's happened is our taxes have gone up.
Uh, well, thank you to Ryan, Casey, Matthew, Andy. Really appreciate this. We will send out to everyone who was on the call on the press side, we'll send out a follow-up email that's got the recording and also the slides that I shared earlier. If there is any information that we can help you with, if you're looking to connect with other businesses, please let us know. We want to be a resource, and I'll just flag that the next U.S. government release is next Thursday for February. So we'll sort of do a wrap up data session here, so we'll have a better sense of the final IEPA cost by state and things like that. But if there's anything we could help, um, yes, I just saw a question about making sure that email includes titles and names of everyone's companies. Yes, we'll be sure to include that. But anything else that we can help with, please let us know. Again, thank you for your time.
Thank you for
Thank you.
listening
Thank
to
you.
that.